Welcome back, traders and investors. We got a little surprise for you here on a Friday morning. We got a little fill-in for our 9 o'clock guest, and we have Alan Brochstein, and he is the author of the 420 Investment Letter, focusing on the sector we haven't talked about in a while, the marijuana sector. Alan, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I was doing better about a month ago when I spent a month in Colorado. I'm back in hot Texas, but doing very well today.
Okay, well, just give us your overview here. Haven't heard much on the regulatory front as of late. Well, what's going on in individual states and what's going on in Washington?
So things haven't really changed too much recently. We have the governor of New Jersey basically evicting himself from serious contention with his anti-marijuana statements. But I'm looking forward to next year. We have one presidential candidate who's been very vocal about medical marijuana, and that's Rand Paul. Not trying to pick favorites or anything like that, but just from the cannabis perspective, he's really the only person so far that's really proven himself to be an ally, a big ally. In fact, he's one of the co-sponsors of the Carers Act. I think we talked about that the last time with Cory Booker from New Jersey and Kirsten Gillibrand from New York. So he's the positive. The rest of the field we're going to try to figure out. Next year is shaping up to be super exciting from a state perspective. Nevada should be voting. The citizens of Nevada in the November election, as well as California. And I think today we're going to get an announcement about an effort in Florida to have, it's going to be a little bit confusing there. They're going to have another medical marijuana ballot initiative and a legal marijuana initiative. And then I guess one other ballot initiative, Ohio. I don't like that program, but I guess I'm for legalization, but we can talk about it probably the next time. It's not even worth talking about right now, but they're trying to set up essentially a buy your way in system where a group of 10 wealthy people are paying for the ballot initiative, but they get the licenses. It's totally insane. I'm a capitalist, but that's kind of bizarre.
Alan, it's been a while since we've had you on the show. It's been a while since I've had a chance to interview you here as well. I just want to get the overall landscape from you here because we've had, the sector was really hot a year and a half ago there, and it's kind of got quiet here now. But you're obviously starting to see some separation of maybe the companies that are going to make it or maybe the companies that aren't going to make it here. If you were compiling a list of, 3 or 4 companies in the marijuana sector that you think, are eventually going to maybe be the leaders in the sector, which companies would those be?
So things have not changed at all from my perspective. Most of these penny stocks are outright scams. They have nothing to do with the cannabis space. And, they enjoyed notoriety last year and they've come down. And it's unfortunate because it really turned off a lot of people. With that said, we've talked a lot about GW Pharma, and that's the big cap NASDAQ listed biotech company. And there's a couple of other, I don't consider them cannabis companies, but we can talk about them at some point. So I'm not going to put these on your list, but there was a recent IPO that you guys probably saw called Zynerba Pharmaceuticals, symbol ZYNE. It's been a real go-go stock. And then Insys. I don't consider those really cannabis stocks. They are biotech stocks, biotech companies that take some of the components of cannabis and study them, but they're synthetically derived. As a matter of fact, I call them the anti-cannabis stocks. On the OTC, I'm tracking about 325 different names, and it's really disgusting. But to answer your question, there are a handful of them. I have to be careful. I don't want to tell you. If I tell you 3 or 4, there might be a fifth one that I leave off. So anybody listening should realize that this might not be the entire list. But some of the more promising ones, in my view, would include there's a new company called Mass Roots, MSRT. I don't think that we've talked about it.
No, I don't remember this one.
Maybe I mentioned it, but it started trading in April, and it had this, of all dates, and many of your listeners will understand the date. On April 20th, the stock exploded. It was crazy, but in fact, it did. And it traded, I think, as high as $7, and it settled back down. That is a social network. They've gotten really good media attention and actually kind of global attention. They're an app, and they were in the Apple Store, and Apple kicked them out. Classic David versus Goliath story. They were able to get back on, but they your listeners may not realize this, but given that cannabis is federally illegal, it makes it very difficult on many fronts. And one of the fronts is you can't really advertise, and there's a lot of social stigma as well. So people who are heavily into cannabis use don't necessarily want to put it on their Facebook. It could get back to their work or things like that. So these guys have created what's called a semi-anonymous community. You don't have to use your name. I guess they would be able to track you because they have your email or phone number, whatever it is. It's mainly a mobile service, but some call it the Instagram of weed or something like that. But this company is only 2 years old. It's run by some very young people. The founder was one of the candidates. He didn't win, but the Peter Thiel, I think they call it 20 under 20. I forgot what the program is, but where he pays you not to go to college. Anyway, I'm probably talking too much about that. Would be one. There's another company that it's had a nice run recently. I certainly wouldn't necessarily tell anybody to buy it today. But Surna, S-U-R-N-A is the way you spell that. S-R-N-A is the symbol. And it's been your typical terrible reverse merger. That Massroots, they actually did what's called an S1. So it wasn't a reverse merger. It was an underwritten, self-directed IPO. They raised capital at 50 cents, so it's been very successful. Surna, on the other hand, total disaster when it comes to the price action. But it's a very real company. They solve one of the critical problems facing the cultivators, the high cost of energy, very energy intensive industry. So they have a few technologies there. So that would be one. So that's two that I've given you. Believe me, and it gets really hard. I still think that investors are best served by looking at Canada. And I've talked before about Tweed and Bedrocan as being two of my favorite stocks. Well, since we last spoke, they're merging. And so two of my favorite Canadian MMPR entities are merging. Tweed will be the surviving stock. The symbol's TWD on the TSX Venture. There's a U.S. tracking ticker as well. And I went and visited those guys. I think we might have talked about that the last time I was on. I went in May to visit both those two and another one that I like as well. Going back to the United States, can I add to that list? So I told you earlier that there's those three biotechs that are on the NASDAQ, GW Pharma, plus the other two that I mentioned that aren't really marijuana stocks. There's another small biotech called NEMUS, N-M-U-S. It's been pretty much a disaster too. Another kind of a reverse merger issue, but this is a company that has a relationship with the University of Mississippi. That's the one entity that the federal government allows to grow marijuana legally, and they provide a lot of the research cannabis. And this company has a preclinical drug that addresses, it's a topical, it's eye drops. It treats glaucoma. So it's very risky. It's a biotech, but I find that one interesting as well.
What are your overall thoughts here on the marijuana sector? Just obviously you cover this sector in detail here, and do you feel like that there's a buzz starting around this again? Because obviously the buzz left. Do you feel like this is something that eventually is going to catch fire here again? Because it seems like the buzz goes from this to this to this, and obviously it was here a year ago. Do you think some of these marijuana stocks, the buzz could come back and these could start catching fire again?
So short answer is yes. What I tell people is the stocks that are trading now, like I said earlier, are for the most part jokes. So I think what we really need are new entries into the space. There have been a few of them. I think that bubble bursting last year scared off a lot of people. I was at a conference in June, and a lot, to contrast, a year ago, June, everybody wanted to go public. Now, people are like, Alan, I don't ever want to go public. So it's kind of an awkward time. I think next year there's going to be a lot of excitement because of these elections late in the year, the presidential election where we know it's going to get some play, also these state elections. But there's one other issue that I think is super exciting and hard to figure how it's going to play out. But there were some changes that came about because of the Jobs Act, and it's called Regulation A plus, and this is a new way to go to market or to raise capital, I should say, for a company. And it just went effective in June. It takes probably 6 to 9 months, so we'll start to see some of these companies hit the market in early 2016. There's two things here that are really going to drive this. Number one, so right now, if you're a company looking to raise capital, you pretty much have to do it with accredited investors. Those are people that have $1 million in assets or $300,000 a year in family income. So that limits the universe. So Reg A Plus opens the doors to lower thresholds. So through that process, you don't have to include primarily accredited investors. More importantly, when you do an S1 like Massroots did, which is a self-directed IPO, it's very expensive because you have to go register in every single state, and those costs are about $250,000. Reg A Plus wipes those out, so it's cheaper to do. It's the same process, cheaper to do, and you can reach more people. And on top of that, OTC markets, that's what used to be the pink sheets, is going to allow these companies to trade even without full SEC filing compliance. So right now, as you guys know, if you're a SEC filer, you have to file quarterly reports as well as an annual report. For these Reg A Plus, it's just semi-annual. So a small change, and there's some other subtle changes as well, but basically a democratization of the space. So I think that's going to allow companies, some of these better companies, and also some worse companies, unfortunately, but I think that's going to help. So the whole marijuana space has seen several different waves, and obviously the last one was just astronomical. I don't think we'll ever see anything like that again. The market was extremely inefficient. We had tons of people coming into the market and very few companies. Now we have a lot more companies, but I think we also have smarter investors as well. So I think we will have another upcycle. It'll be with different companies than we're talking about right now for the most part.
We're on the line with Alan Brochstein. He's the author of the Marketfy 420 investment letter. Alan, I want to talk to you a little bit about your time out in Colorado here, because what I'm looking at this is that in order to companies to be substantial, to have earnings, to make it worthwhile for governments, state governments to legalize marijuana. I mean, what's the bottom line for Colorado right now? I mean, the shops are open? Is it cutting down on illegal drug trafficking? Is it generating any kind of revenues for the states? Because really that's what's going to get going and get the sector going. How are things going in Colorado?
So yeah, and I will confess, I got a chance to see a lot of dispensaries there and get a real good flavor, better than I ever have before. That was my 7th trip to Colorado in 18 months. And as your listeners may not be aware, but Colorado was one of the first 2 states to have the voters legalize. Washington be the other. Colorado had about a 6-month head start on implementation. Right now, Oregon and Alaska are legal as well in the implementation process. So Colorado had a governor who was against legalization. There were so many concerns. For the most part, everybody who had concerns has breathed a collective sigh of relief so far. It's been much better than people would have imagined. I think there have been a tremendous number of challenges, and when I talk to companies there, it's still very challenging. They have some crazy things like for what they call adult use cannabis, it has to be tested in labs. But if it's for medical use, it doesn't, which is just crazy. They should be testing that also. There's all sorts of issues with the edibles, and we could talk more about that. But basically, there's been so many changes, and it's improving, but there's still challenges. Another huge challenge is and I learned this the first time I went to Colorado, which was in January of, right after they legalized in January of 2014. anybody can walk into a store and buy it, but good luck using it. And that's one of the reasons why edibles really took off. There's the tourists are really in a tough spot. You can't. Most of the hotels will not allow you to consume cannabis. You face very expensive fines if they catch you. It's you still feel like a criminal basically. So I think the big picture is everybody in the world that's thinking about cannabis. And these we're talking about countries all over the world. Uruguay, a lot of South American countries looking at this now. Everybody's looking at Colorado. The experiment so far has been good. It's not perfect, and there's still some issues there, but for the most part, it's worked out well. Washington, unfortunately, they've had, and I think that's been a tougher implementation, and on many fronts. One of the things that's really bothered me is I think it was about 13 or 14% of the dispensaries that were randomly checked sold cannabis to what would you call those undercover agents that were underage. You have to be 21, and they were their IDs showed that they were under 21. So definitely a lot of work to get done. But I think we're moving in the right direction in terms of the states. There was a meeting out in Hawaii. A whole bunch of different state entities met out there to talk about legalization, and they're finally implementing their medical program.
All right, we've been on the line with Alan Brochstein. He is the author of the 420 Investment Letter, coming on talking about the marijuana sector. Thanks for coming on at the last second again, Alan, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Okay, thanks a lot, guys. Y'all enjoy the rest of your summer.